this school-age population, it's 4-year-olds to 11-year-olds who have addresses in this attendance area. So back in 2006, you can see the school-age population, 4-year-olds to 11-year-olds, and that corresponds to the grade range of Garden, junior kindergarten to grade 6. There was about 350 children who lived here. And that's increased over time to 2013. Now there's 450 school-age children residing in this attendance area. At the same time, the children who live here, more are choosing to come to Garden, and that's what's indicated by that red line. That red line is what we call the participation rate. Out of the school-age population that lives in this attendance area, how many kids are actually choosing to come to the local school. So out of the school-age population, not everybody comes to the TDSB. As we know, there's many options in the city. So the choices are you can come to your local TDSB school, you can go to the Catholic board, you can go to the 2 French public boards, you can go to homeschooling, you can go to a private school, you can go outside of the area to another TDSB, another Catholic school, you can seek other program options outside of this area. So in 2006, the 350 kids who lived in this area, only 50% local kids were choosing to come to Garden. But you can see that this red line, this participation rate, has increased over time. We've had an increase in school-age population, we've had an increase in participation rate. Now it's 58% of the local kids are choosing to come to Garden. So those two trends, the increase in school-age population and the increase in participation rate, has had an impact on the actual enrollment at Garden Public School. And that's shown in this table. This table summarizes the enrollment at Garden from 2006 to 2013. And you read this across. So the years are here on the left-hand side, and along the top we have the grades associated with Garden. So the columns on the left-hand side are junior kindergarten half-time and senior kindergarten half-time. This reflects the enrollment when we had the half-day kindergarten across the city. Right beside the half-time columns are the junior kindergarten and senior kindergarten full-time columns, and this shows the impact of full-day kindergarten. And you can see where full-day kindergarten was implemented. Kids are no longer half-time in these columns, they're here now, and full-day kindergarten was implemented in 2013 at this school. Then we have the other grades, grades 1 through to grade 6. 2 columns on the right-hand side are totals. We have the total head count, and that's just simply a sum of all the kids across the grades. It counts every kid as one, every unique individual as one. And the column beside it, called total full-time equivalent, that's a count of the kids by the amount of time that they're registered at the school for instruction. So when we had the half-day kindergarten program, those kids only attended school for half a day, and they're counted as 0.5 in the total full-time equivalent. That's an important column for funding purposes and for comparison to the capacity. So when you look at these enrollments over time, you can see how those changes in school-age population and participation rate have impacted the school. You can see the size of the incoming junior kindergarten group or cohort. We've had years where it's been as low as 33, and you can see it's increased into the 40s, and then last year we had an incoming class of 50 students. And there's been a similar impact at the SK level. We've had some groups as low as 35, and then there's been an increase to 40, and last year we had 41 students in senior kindergarten. So the school-age population is impacting the number of kids coming into the school at the entry grade junior kindergarten. The participation rate is impacting students as they move from grade to grade. So that's what we call the retention rate, the proportion of the kids in grade 1 who end up in grade 2 the following year. And it's seldom 100% across the system. There's often attrition happening, and there has been attrition between the grades in Garden. But over the last 3 years, there's been an increase in the retention rate. So Garden has been keeping more and more of its own students. And you can see the impact on the total head count. Back in 2006, it was around 240 students, and then it increased to 273 in 2012, and in 2013, it was 292. So given those trends, if you apply them to the enrollment at Garden into the future, this is the projection that results. And the projection are all the rows in blue. So this projection is based upon a preschool population remaining high. And we get this data actually from a third-party demographic firm called Demographic Systems. That's what's helping us judge what the size of the incoming junior kindergarten cohort is. And we have it projected to remain high, 48 into the low 50s, but really stabilizing at around 48. And then we have the retention rate that we've observed over the last 3 years. We've applied that to the school as well. And that's what's causing each of these cohorts to change in size. It's the application of that higher retention rate. So when you apply these trends to the school's enrollment, you see the enrollment growing from the 240s into the 290s into the 300s, and then out 10 years from now, it could be 366. So we're estimating that the future enrollment of Garden could be 350 to 370, in that range. And the Garden building is fully occupied now. So as of last week, when we did our enrollment report, there were 284 students in the building, and this is showing how the school is organized. So this floor plan is the first floor. The rooms shaded red are used by Garden, and the rooms shaded blue are used by the Child Care Center. To help orientate you to this floor plan, this is where we're located right now. This is the gym, and this is a small gym. It's not much bigger than one of the kindergarten rooms. This is the new addition that was built. So this is the play field extending out the back, and this is the front door of the building. So when you look around the rooms to see how they're being used, you can see that there's a homeroom. There's a class in every room. This is a grade 1, 2, a grade 1, a grade 1, 2, a grade 2. We have the full-day kindergarten classes in each of the new rooms, and because full-day kindergarten was high this September, we had to open a 4th full-day kindergarten, and that's located there. So the 4th full-day kindergarten is in one of the old kindergarten rooms that existed before the new addition was built. So there is one specialty room. That is a withdrawal space. So that is a space to support curriculum. It's to support music, drama, dance, things like that. Classes are withdrawn out of their homeroom and they go to the specialty room. So our standard is for elementary schools to have one specialty room. Many schools have more than one specialty room, and when they start getting full, we advise them, you've got to reduce down to one specialty room. And Garden is doing that. Garden has the one specialty room, and that is our expectation. This is the second floor. When you look at the room uses on the second floor, you see homerooms, grade 4-5, grade 2-3, grade 5-6, grade 4-5, grade 3. Here's the library. It's a very small library. It's the size of a regular classroom. And then we have the special education homeschool program located in a seminar-sized room. It's less than half the size of a classroom. So the special education homeschool program, it's not a program that kids are bused into from outside of the area. Every one of our elementary schools has a homeschool program. It's designed to help kids who live in the area. So this is a local program. And our standard is for special education homeschool programs really to be in full-size classrooms. But this school has had to achieve efficiencies to accommodate the students, and the homeschool program is in this smaller space, this seminar room. The Garden building cannot accommodate the projected growth. So this graph shows the enrollment, the historical enrollment, and the projected enrollment that I've shown you in the table. It's just showing it graphically now. But what I've added to it is the building's capacity line. So this is the historical enrollment, the full-time equivalent. This black dash line is the capacity. And this is the projection going up to around 350, 370, and this is the building's new capacity. So this jump in capacity here is the opening of the new three-room addition. So previous to the addition, the capacity was around 220, and the historical full-time equivalent enrollment, you can see it was around 90% of the capacity, which is a good level. That's really our objective. Have buildings occupied at about 90%. Then they have a bit of flex space to deal with those annual fluctuations in enrollment that we're fated to always have. The school started to get full here in 2011, 2012, and that's when we added one portable. This big jump is the change in enrollment as a result of full-day kindergarten. Kindergartens were counted 0.5 here. Now they're counted 1. That's causing the big jump. But this is how we responded. We built an addition, a 3-room addition, and the capacity became 294 pupil places. So we really want the enrollment, the blue line, to be down about here, to be about 90% of that capacity of 294. We want it to be around 260, 270. That's more suited to the size of this building and the size of this site. So just other indicators of how tight this building is. This is a small gym, and the school has already implemented 2 lunch shifts in it, and the strings program is delivered in the foyer. So our objective is to deliver quality programs in the appropriate space. And by this, we mean having full-day kindergarten classes in purpose-built full-day kindergarten rooms, not in regular classrooms. We want schools to have a specialty room for withdrawal basis. We don't want them to have 3 withdrawal rooms. We just want them to have 1. We want the homeschool program, the special education program, to be in a regular size classroom. And we want there to be some space, some flex space for those annual variations in enrollment. So we need to manage the projected enrollment growth here at Garden. We need to bring it down to a level that's suitable for this building and for this site. Bring it down to the 90% level, around 260, 270 students. And our goal is to minimize impact on students. We've considered a number of options. We've considered 8 options, and they're summarized here. So the first option is to close the school to optional attendance. So when a school starts becoming full, when it starts to go above 80% utilization, that's when we recommend that the school be closed to kids from outside of the area. So optional attendance, just for background, that's the process that parents go through to apply to the school when they live outside of the area. They don't have a right to go to it because they don't have an address in the boundary. They live outside, they want to go to the school, and we have a policy that says you can go to the school as long as there's spaces available. And sometimes there's a lottery if there's many parents applying to the school. So when a school starts going over 80%, that's when we recommend the school should be closed. And Garden has been closed to optional attendance since 2010. So this option has already been exercised. The second option is to reorganize the use of space in the school. And we've just been through the floor plans, and you've seen that the building is efficiently utilized. They're really using every classroom for a homeroom. They've already reduced to the single specialty room. They have special ed happening in a small seminar room. We could eliminate the specialty room. If there's growth, we could convert that to a regular classroom, but that's going to impact program delivery across the whole school. The third option is relocate a program. So Garden has one program, it's the regular program. There isn't a French immersion program here or an extended French program. There is not a regional special ed program like a behavioral program that kids are bused into. There's just the local homeschool special ed program. So there's nobody to move out of the building from a program perspective. The fourth option is to add portables to the site. So Garden has a very small site, it's 1.7 acres. The average site size for a junior school in the Toronto District School Board is 4.8 acres. Garden is the 9th smallest elementary school site in the TDSB, and that's 9th smallest out of 432 elementary sites. So adding even one portable to the school site is going to take up valuable outdoor space that's needed for recess, for outdoor activities, for physical education. This aerial photo shows the configuration of the site right now. This is the new three-room addition. This is the relocated playscape. And if we had to add 3 to 5 portables to the school site, this is where they would go. And the recommendation from our facility services department is to not add any portables to this school site. 0 portables should come here. The fifth option that we looked at is reducing the grade range of Garden. So right now Garden is JK to 6. How about reducing it to JK to 4 or JK to 3? Try to match the grades that you remove to the number of kids that you need to reduce the enrollment by. And this would involve sending grades 5 to 6 or 4 to 6 to a nearby school that has space available. And there is a nearby school with space available. It's Parkdale Junior and Senior Public School. One of the disadvantages of this option is that the northern portion of the Garden attendance area is outside of walking distance to Parkdale. We have a transportation policy, and it says that students in junior kindergarten to grade 5, an acceptable walking distance for them is 1.6 kilometers. And if you live further than 1.6 kilometers from your designated school, then you're eligible for busing. We really don't want to bus the students in the north part of Garden to Parkdale. We want kids to walk to school. We believe in active student transportation. That's what's best for neighborhoods and for families and for kids. So when it comes to designing grades and boundaries, we want to keep that 1.6 kilometer threshold in mind. We don't want to have a grade range or a boundary that causes us to bus, forcing kids onto transportation. The other big disadvantage of this option is that it impacts all the families in the Garden area, not just a small portion of them. This map shows the portion of the Garden area that's outside of 1.6 kilometers of Parkdale. So just to help orientate you to the map, the red lines are junior attendance areas. This is the Garden area, and Garden itself is located here. And this is Parkdale's, and this is the Parkdale building. All the green shaded lines are within 1.6 kilometers of Parkdale. And so there's a portion here that I colored in yellow that's outside of the 1.6 kilometers walking distance to Parkdale. The sixth addition is to construct The sixth option is to construct an addition onto Parkdale,
Or a new school.
onto Garden. Construct an addition onto Garden.
Or a new school.
Or a new school.
Tear it down and this is a dump.
Questions at the end, but, or a new school, you're right.
This place is a dump. You need a new school.
When it comes to constructing new pupil places, we require the approval of the Ministry of Education. So we don't have autonomy, we don't have independence. And the ministry expects that we use all existing space in nearby schools before we build new pupil places somewhere. And so there is available space in a nearby
Why don't
school.
you shut up? Sir, we'll get to your questions or comment after we're done, if you don't mind. Thank you.
So there is a space available in a nearby school, and it's at Parkdale. So as long as there's space available at Parkdale, the ministry is not going to be supportive of building an addition or a new school on the Garden site. The other aspect of building a new school or an addition here is this is a small site. The average site size is 4.8 acres. This is 1.7 acres. And really, we need to keep that in mind when we consider how many kids we want to be accommodating on the site. We really don't want to have over 300 kids here, and that would be assuming that we have permission to build here. It's just too many kids for a site of this size. The seventh option is to relocate the child care center out of this building. So the Ministry of Education is now responsible for early learning, and the ministry expects child care centers to be accommodated in schools. It's part of their vision. Similarly, the TDSB has a policy that supports child care centers being in school. We think that child care centers are an important part of delivering service to families and to children. Child care centers are an integral part of our full-day kindergarten program. We're expecting the in-house child care center to deliver the before and after school component of the full-day kindergarten program. So for those reasons, we're reluctant to move the child care center. It's part of our vision of what an elementary school should be. It also doesn't solve the problem. The child care center, as you saw from the floor plans, it occupies one full-size room and one little room. So we're estimating the problem could be 3 to 5 rooms, and this isn't enough on its own. The eighth option that we've looked at is changing the boundaries. So moving a portion of the Garden Junior attendance area to a nearby school that has space available. Parkdale Junior Senior Public School has space available and it's nearby. There's a portion of the junior attendance area that's within walking distance. There's actually addresses in this portion that are closer to Parkdale than they are to Garden. And the portion that we've identified would be sufficient to address that projected enrollment growth and bring the enrollment down at Garden to the preferred level of 260, 270. This map illustrates the proposed boundary change. And we have 3 areas that are shaded: pink, yellow, and turquoise. This is area 1 in pink, area 2 is yellow, and area 3 is in turquoise. So area 1 is bound by Roncesvalles, Marion, Fuller, and Queen. And if you live in this area, your designated school for junior kindergarten to grade 6 is Garden, and your designated school for grades 7 and 8 is Fern. And what we're proposing is that this area be assigned to Parkdale for the full grade range JK through to grade 8. And there's 97 kids living in this area as of October of last year. Option number 2, or area number 2, this is the yellow area. It's bound by Fuller, Pearson, McDonald, and Queen. And if you live in this area, your current designated junior school is Parkdale for JK to grade 6, but your designated intermediate school for grades 7 and 8 is Fern. And we're proposing that this whole area become part of Parkdale, not just for JK to 6, but for JK through to grade 8. And right now, there's actually 0 students living there who are choosing to go to Fern for grades 7 and 8 in the regular program. Kids are really going to Parkdale for JK to grade 6 and then staying there. They're staying with their peer group. So this is more of a cleanup. Area 3, the turquoise. That area is bound by Brock, Earnbridge, Noble, and Queen. And this is a unique area in the city. We call it a shared attendance area. It has 2 designated home schools. So as a parent living there, you could choose to send your child to Parkdale for JK to grade 8 or to Alexander Muir Gladstone, which is to the east, for JK to grade 8. And so there are a number of these across the system, but they are the anomaly in the system. The vast majority of addresses in the city of Toronto have a single address, or single home school assigned to them. And so one of the things we want to do as planning staff is to address these anomalous attendance areas and to reduce them down to a single homeschool. And the reason why we want to do that is these areas are perceived as inequitable. Most of the parents have choice of just one homeschool. We think every address should have just one homeschool. They make forecasting enrollments challenging because you're trying to guess what choices parents are going to make. Sometimes kids jump between homeschools. They start at this school and then they move to this school. And really we want kids to commit to one school and stay with your peer group and graduate from that school. It also divides neighborhoods and peer groups. So right now, there's the 2 designated schools, Parkdale and Alexander Muir Gladstone. We want to reduce it to just Parkdale. And there's 2 students living in that area who have chosen to go to Alexander Muir Gladstone. The others are going to Parkdale. To implement these boundary changes, we are proposing grandparenting. And by grandparenting, we mean exempting any current student from the proposed boundary change. And these are all the rules describing the grandparenting. And I'll read them to you. So all students who reside in Area 1 who are currently attending Garden and their younger siblings will be allowed to attend Garden until they graduate from the school. All students who reside in Area 1 who are currently attending Garden and their younger siblings will be allowed to feed into Fern for grades 7 and 8, provided that the younger siblings attended Garden. All students who reside in Area 2 who are currently attending Fern in grade 7 and 8 regular program and their younger siblings will be allowed to attend Fern until they graduate from the school. All students who reside in Area 3 who are currently attending Alexander Muir Gladstone and their younger siblings will be allowed to attend Alexander Muir Gladstone until they graduate from the school. This is conditional upon families remaining in their current addresses. If they move, they will be subject to the boundaries that exist at that time. These 2 tables show the impact of the proposed boundary changes on enrollment and utilization at the 4 affected schools. So the top table in red is just the status quo. If we don't do anything, this is what the enrollment, utilization, room needs could look like at the 4 schools. And the table on the bottom, shaded in blue, this shows the impact of the proposed boundary changes. So when we look at the top table, we have the 4 schools listed on the left-hand side, and along the top, we're showing grade range, building capacity, and then we're showing figures for 3 time periods, for October of 2013, October of 2018, October of 2023. For each time period, we're showing the headcount enrollment, the utilization rate. Utilization rate is simply enrollment divided by capacity, and we're showing the additional rooms required. When you look at Garden, you can see the enrollment of 292 in 2013 is increasing over the 10 years to 330 to 366. This is consistent with the graph in the table that I showed you earlier. And this is what's causing 124% utilization and the need for 3 to 5 rooms approximately. Fern is growing too. Fern is 601, growing to 716, growing to 771. And what's happening at Fern is there is a French immersion program that is in implementation right now. It hasn't expanded to its full grade range yet. It's up to grade 6. It still has to go to grade 7 and grade 8. This school could become full in the future and could require 1 room. When we look at and Parkdale has space available, 61% utilized, and it's going down to 47% utilized. When we look at the impact of the proposed boundary changes, we can see Garden, its enrollment with first implementation is going to be at around 300, but then it's going to come down over time to around 270. It would be 92% utilized and no rooms would be required. Fern will go down marginally, just enough that we wouldn't require the additional room. And when we look at Parkdale, Parkdale goes up to around 50% utilization. So in conclusion, by implementing these boundary changes, we think that we've addressed the issue at Garden. We think that we've managed to prevent the enrollment growth and bring it down to a level that's appropriate for the size of the building and the size of the site, to bring the enrollment down to 90% of the capacity to around 260, 270 students. We think that this boundary change minimizes the impact on current students. And we believe by acting now, we're being proactive. And that's what's allowing us to implement full grandparenting, including the younger siblings, because we're acting early before a crisis develops. In terms of next steps, over the next month, we'll be preparing a staff report with recommendations. And that goes to our trustees for decision making. So our trustees, our 22 trustees, they are decision makers. And our report will first go to the Planning and Priorities Committee meeting on November 12th. And this is a subcommittee of the whole board. And it's here where the staff recommendations will be first debated. And it's also here where members of the public can present to the trustees. Members of the public can express themselves, they can depute. And on our sign-in table, we have a handout there, how to make a delegation. So there's a procedure to follow to get your name on a list to make a presentation to the trustees. From the Planning and Priorities Committee meeting, the staff report with recommendations goes to the whole board meeting on November 26th. This is where all 22 trustees meet, and they will debate the recommendations again, and this is where they'll make the final vote and the final decision. And assuming they make a decision at a board meeting, we would then communicate it to the community through a letter, and that would come out in early December. Finally, the boundary changes, if they were approved, they would be effective for admission to the 2015-2016 school year. We've made a note that we're here today to listen and to get feedback from you, and depending on the discussions that unfold, we can organize a working meeting if required to explore further options. So now we're at the point in the agenda where we open the floor to you for questions, answers, and feedback.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And we have 3 microphones. So we've got 2 moving around. We've got this one here. So I will be directing the questions, and put up your hand and we'll go into order, and we're here for the next hour to answer questions. Okay, so we've got Sir here and then your second after. Go ahead, sir.
2 questions. Why are there 3 schools providing French immersion in this part of Ward 14? And when are you planning to close Alexander Moore, because it's less than 50% capacity, or it's pretty low, and if those students went over to Parkdale, Parkdale would be full 100%, which is what the ministry requires for the school board to receive the money coming in from new condo developments.
The expansion of French immersion is in response to the demand for French immersion. So it's not unique to Toronto, it's something that's happening all across the GTA. Parents are interested in French immersion. Dual track schools are a model that we believe in, and we've had to introduce more dual track schools to satisfy the demand. There's a lot of interest in Ward 7.
I can add something about the French also, is that 2 years ago we have a policy that was approved by board that if as a parent you are looking for a French immersion program, you apply to get a spot and you are guaranteed a spot in a French immersion program. Not necessarily the school that offers it right now, depending on the space, but you are guaranteed of a spot. So that's why over the last couple of years, we've opened a number of additional programs in different schools to accommodate that need.
Well, I would like to ask, there is a new shared building on Lansdowne north of College, shared by the Catholic French Board and the Public French Board, are learning English in the public schools. My daughter learned English in the public school. She was in English immersion in the English board. And I don't really understand why the 2 closer schools to Garden have no space because they're occupied with these special programs, when a special program moving was one of the listed options before redrawing the catchment.
That certainly is your opinion, sir.
It's
I
a
think that we are certainly answering a need from the community about French, and we are a board that offers instruction in English and in French. Sir.
With regard to the grandparenting, my son transitioned from another school system into grade 7 at Fern this year, and he has a younger sibling who's in grade 5 in the other system, and we hope will be transitioning in 2 years to Fern, following her brother. We happen to fall within Area 1, all right, so does the grandparenting include grade 7 and 8 only students and their siblings?
The grandparenting is designed to minimize impact on kids who are currently in Garden and their designated schools.
Yeah, our children are in Fern.
So I'm thinking this through off the top of my head. If your younger child is not in Garden right now, if you've made the decision to not have them in Garden,
Yeah, well,
then I'm not sure if the grandparenting rule would apply to you.
okay, so my son, who is currently at Fern in grades 7 and 8, I guess he will be, right? And she will be hopefully following him, is our intention, but she's not in the TDSB at the moment. Are you saying she would be excluded?
What grade is your daughter in?
She's in grade 5. It'll be 2 years before she starts in. Does she count as a sibling under your?
I think we have to ponder that one. I don't have an answer for you.
Well, surely an exception can be made, and you know, something. Yeah. You and I have talked about it.
They're making exceptions.
Other questions? I'm sure there are others. At the back there, yes. We'll make our way to you. Just give us a second, please.
I don't need a microphone, I don't think.
No, I think you do. Okay. If you don't mind.
Hello.
Hi.
You had mentioned a working group, and I was just wondering what needed to happen to have there be a working group. I know you said it was a possibility.
So we're open to it, and it depends on the discussion that unfolds tonight.
Okay, so what, I'm just interested in what
We
needs
wish to assess what people think of the proposed boundary change.
Okay, so
we
then
want
I-
to get a sense of possible other options that people might think would meet our objective of minimizing impact and be
Okay.
palatable to people.
So then I would be interested in a working group, I don't know.
And ma'am, we'll work through the principle. If we are getting to a working group, we'll work through the principle.
So how do we kind of show our interest in the working group?
For what purpose?
I mean, the purpose of the working group is to have the discussion here tonight. If people do come out with ideas, suggestions, proposals that were not listed, we can certainly hear them out. We would have to discuss them to see if they are possible, yes or no. We would need to cost them out and then present it to the community again.
Okay, so the working group would just be if there are new, different ideas?
Yes. Yes. Sir, you have a question?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I've got a question. I've got a bit of a background maybe to start off with. I mean, with the proposed boundary change of Area 1, we're seeing that areas east of Bronson's-Vales, south to Queen, are being proposed to be removed from the Fern and Garden catchment. And these areas include a 16-story apartment building with 380 units or so, housing a significant number of new immigrant families who are renting. We've got rental units and stores on Queen Street West. We've got streets like my street, houses like my house, where people live or rent in subdivided houses. And in some ways, one of my concerns is that this proposal moves to take the most population dense, the lowest income, the most socially and culturally diverse portion of the catchment as it stands, and excise it. There's something about the way this line is being drawn which doesn't quite seem right. It doesn't quite seem fair. Now, lines define by dividing, and they've got a lot of power. And so far, we've seen the power of these lines in this handout, just as a proposal. Separate the neighbors from each other, my friends from my friends. Are you in, are you out? Are you for, are you against? Are you east or west? Are you deserving or are you undeserving, right? And I think that I just wonder about the greater goals. Now, I appreciate very much the presentation that Mr. Gowdy has made and yourself, Madam Gardner. This is great information. I wish it came earlier, because I think that, I wonder about this objective, these greater objectives of which make total sense about moving numbers of people from an underutilized school or from an overutilized school to an underutilized school. But it comes with a price of actually dismantling this magnificent urban community, which is complex, it's vibrant, it's diverse. It comes with an engaged parent. Look at these. Look at these people, right? We serve on school boards, like my friend Leslie Ross. We serve on parental committees like my friend, my neighbor, Madeline Cruikshank. We volunteer for field trips like Mr. Ian Worling, my good friend. We volunteer for school activities. We volunteer our professional services for fundraising, like Susanna Krokorka. Right? The TDSB tells us that parents play a vital role in the development and education of our children and the success of these schools, and have invested over $24 million since 2006 in something called the Parents Reaching Out grants to help increase parental involvement. So here we have parental involvement par excellence. How is it that with this level of involvement, we could be surprised by this proposal 2 weeks into a new school year? The plan that accompanied the handbook that came out not 2 weeks ago was dated February of 2014. We couldn't find out about this in June.
Shane.
Pardon me? I mean, thank you for the information about this process. Because before tonight, we didn't know where we stood. How is this a done deal? Who's making these decisions? Why haven't we been included in these conversations about things which will affect our lives? Now, and I have to say that, you know, I appreciate very much the information that you've shown earlier tonight, Mr. Gowdy, about this overcrowded population, because, you know, we've been given the ostensible reason, well, because overcrowding. This is because overcrowding. And we take a look at this information, and really, I mean, we live in this neighborhood. We've seen how it's changed over the past 8 years, since 2006, when we see the growth of the population of Garden Public School, another 50 students. And it seems to me that you're taking a straight line extrapolation of that data. But I mean, the reality of real estate prices in the GTA are such that, I mean, as much as people want to live here, to send their kids here, they're priced out of the market. Where is this growth coming from?
Sir, can I ask that you get to your questions, or?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I'm very sorry.
What do you have? I'm fine with that. I want to make sure that other people have a chance.
Oh, you know, we're being represented, thank you.
But Madam Gardner, it's that you see everybody here, and we've been talking about it ever since this thing came out. We're concerned. We're worried. Because, like, we haven't had a lot of data that's come out around this. There's been no contextualization. And so, you know, what constitutes overcrowding anyways? You know, people tell me that Parkdale is an amazing school, that wonderful things have happened there, and I believe them. But, you know, we've talked to officials at the TDSB, and nobody seems to want to answer our questions until tonight. And I thank you for this. But, you know, this being 2014, we Googled it, and I found the TDSB on the TDSB website, something called the Learning Opportunities Index, where the LOI report came out earlier this year. But the TDSB tells me that it's extremely accurate. It has a strong correlation with student achievement, which is to say that children who go to schools that are ranked higher on this on the LOI do better. It also tells me that there's no consensus in literature whether crowding has any noticeable effect on student achievement. So then I take a look at what are the rankings for the schools in question. Garden is in the top 10% of all the schools in the TDSB. Amazing, we know this place. Fern is in the top 13% of all the schools in the TDSB. Now I'm disappointed to find out that Parkdale is at the bottom 20% of all the schools in the TDSB. Now I wonder, should I be concerned about this data? This is the TDSB that's telling me this. If not, Why not? Is a projected overcrowding a possibility of a problem which is being solved before it actually is a problem? Is it elitist for us to have high expectations in wanting our children to be schooled in an environment that best nourishes them? Are we receiving a raw deal? Now, and I apologize for the length of my presentation, but I wanted to just kind of summarize in saying that, all these things that we've been talking about, and we've been talking, man, we put together t-shirts, we put together a website, a petition, we've been talking to the media, and we are engaged, man. But these concerns, roughly categorized as fairness or equity, right? The community that the change will dismantle, inclusiveness of us, the parents, by the board as partners in our children's education, and our high expectations of the TDSB to provide the best environment for our children to flourish. These aren't just our concerns. These are the TDSB's own core objectives for their model schools, just like Parkdale. So my question finally, and there is a question. I would like to know how this proposal seeks to achieve the Toronto District School Board's own stated goals. Thank you.
Our goal is to make sure that we have quality programs in the appropriate space. So we're not planning our schools by property value or by income. We're making sure that kids are in front of great teachers under the leadership of a great principal. And you need a classroom to do that. And it is a projected pressure at Garden. And the unfortunate reality of Garden is that there are few solutions to that projected pressure. Other school sites we'd stick a portable on to monitor the enrollment. We don't have that possibility here. We really exhausted all the reasonable solutions. There's space sitting nearby that's very close. It's good classroom space. And that is what we think is the reasonable solution of getting students from an overcrowding problem to a site where space is available.
May I ask one question, sir? And thank you for certainly how you witness, I would say, the dedication of the parents. And I think we do appreciate that, and I hope that you see that we do appreciate that. We're very respectful of that.
Almost all of us are respectful. Someone here is not respectful of it. I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah.
He hasn't been respectful.
Yep, looking at her too.
I'm looking at it right now.
Thank you.
He has not been respectful, and we have noticed.
We
are
voting.
Sir? Okay, thank you. What is one of the solutions you think that we can do? Are we talking about portables? Is that what you think? Are you proposing that portables would be a solution or any other options?
I personally believe that this isn't yet a problem. That we are a solution in seeking a problem. Ultimately, the notion of a problem, I believe that, and thank you for saying that, yeah, what I've witnessed in the past, not even 2 weeks, is a group of incredible, passionate, committed, intelligent parents that that are hungry to be involved. And you know what? This group of people can attract media attention like that, has incredible ideas, incredible resources, and why not tap into this? If there is a problem, can we define it together? If there is a solution, let's look for it together. Because I mean, man, like this is a resource. This is your resource, as you are ours.
questions, okay?
So it's a constrained site with few options for addressing overcrowding if it happens. By acting now, this is what's allowing us to implement grandparenting, including the younger siblings. So this will be a very slow, gradual change over 8 to 10 years. If we wait for more students than can fit in the building, we will be asking students who started here at Garden to leave. Right now, everybody who is in Garden, all their friendships can remain the same. All their relationships they establish with their teachers can remain the same. No student currently in Garden, including their younger siblings who aren't in Garden yet, they will be allowed to flow through Garden. So this is a very slow, very gradual change.
We have a question here.
I just wanted to ask about why you have faith in your demographics, or if you can explain that. And I'm not trying to be overly critical here, but I think the sign might even still be up outside from when they were going to close Garden maybe 10 years ago. And I'm not arguing that the neighborhood hasn't really changed, but then Parkdale was bursting at the seams and was stressed with a lot of, population that moved in, population that moved out. Garden's projected enrollment, I believe, was expected to be 306 this year, and it's about 20 students less than that. So I know you bought it from a company, presumably it's reputable, but why do you believe their data, given all
So my prof in grad school said, there is nothing certain about projections except that they will be wrong. And so as planners, we live by that. We try to make sure that we have flexibility and options to deal with the uncertainty. So the nature of Toronto and our neighborhoods is we're always going to be going through peaks and valleys. And it's going to be our job as the school board to make sure that we're managing those peaks and valleys within space that's available, within the funding envelope, etc. So ideas are fated to change from year to year and from decade to decade. So right now, Garden is in this growth mode based upon the best evidence that we have available. But that evidence is going to ultimately have variance when reality materializes. We need to have options for dealing with that variance. We're very concerned that if that growth happens, that we are going to be in a crisis here in Garden, and we are going to be asking your children to leave Garden and go to Parkdale and make new friends and be in front of new teachers. That's what we're concerned is going to happen if we don't act now with this slow, gradual boundary change that keeps all your kids here. That's what the possible outcome is. We monitor enrollment monthly. We have monthly enrollment reports. We track the enrollment, understand what the accommodation pressures are. We're perpetually having to come up with ideas to balance kids across schools in the system. So if we do this boundary change now, that's not to say it'll be there forever. This part of the city actually was part of Parkdale back in the 1970s. And we're actually just reversing that boundary change. It was assigned to Garden, now we're assigning it back to Parkdale. That's just the reality of working within our funding envelope and having to move kids to where space is available to address pressures and to address crisis. So if the enrollment does go down, let's say for some reason the Garden neighborhood doesn't thrive and it starts tanking, and the enrollment goes below the 260, 270 level, that's our objective. We have two things we can do. You open the school to optional attendance and you let parents from outside of the area apply into it, or you revisit the boundaries and you decide to do a boundary change.
We're going to go to the lady at the microphone, then I'm going to go to the left here, sir, and we'll go back and forth.
Hi, my name is Dina. I live on Sororan. I have a 2-year-old, so in fact, the very vocal parents who are here, but you already said it's not going to affect them, it's going to affect me. And one of the things that I think is really important that I haven't seen happen was you noticed the existing parents didn't let them know that this was a grandfathering option at that time, but didn't notice the rest of the community. Yeah. So I think importantly, he was very articulated in saying like this needs to be more of a two-way conversation. I don't think we're going to meet your December 2014 timeline. I think that, but that's not to say I'm against the boundary change. I think that this is very compelling, the data here. I think we have a group of very intelligent people here who can understand and read the data. I think boundary changes happen for a reason and they make sense. I think that the grandfathering is actually shocking to me, that you're able to achieve that level of grandfathering. That means that you are planning ahead and you are really considering the student's experience in this school. I think that Parkdale is probably a fantastic school, and the way that it's being portrayed is very sad. And I look forward to meeting the principal and the teachers that are at that school. I think the energy in this room, if it was brought to Parkdale, would be amazing. And the EQA scores would rise. And the equity that you're talking about would be increased. So that's the fundamentals of what I think about the boundary change. I think how you've drawn the boundaries might need to be reconsidered. I don't see any attention to the boundaries of Fern, where Parkdale School had the walking distance from where the boundaries are being drawn. I can understand that you might be thinking you want to minimize the impact to the variety of schools that you are engaging. I can understand the rationales that you might have considered while putting this proposal together. I think that a very good working meeting would be to break down the population projections so people can really understand them. There is a lot in demographic. I myself used to be a demographer and worked for a firm that did long-term school accommodation planning. I'm also a planner, so I recognize these things, but I also recognize that it's hard to digest in one meeting, and that this information should be shared earlier, that tools should be given so people can understand it, and that working meetings should be established so people get down into the nitty-gritty and not feel that they don't have full information. That's one working meeting. Another working meeting is to recognize that change is going to occur, and change is constant. And that although your children have already been grandfathered in, that you bring your energy to the next set of children. And that you bring your energy to make Garden and Parkdale wonderful schools. I agree so fully that things like taking the most socioeconomic diverse section of the area and pulling it into the most already socioeconomic diverse school maybe isn't really thoughtful. I disagree with you, Mr. Gowdy, that we shouldn't be drawing lines based on equity factors as well as distance factors. So I think that a working meeting to talk about how these lines would be drawn makes a lot of sense. I also agree, and I hear what you guys are saying, that this isn't a problem. I personally trust in some of the projections. However, if you feel that it is not a problem, I think a working meeting to discuss strategies for that emergency year that will happen, let's do that. Let's say 500 kids come to this school. Okay, what are we going to do? We're going to send all 3, 4, and 5 to Parkdale immediately, no discussion. Let's put that in writing and say that's a board decision. I don't disagree that there's going to be that emergency year, but if the families here want to say, we want to push it to the end, let's have an emergency plan. I think those are 3 viable working meetings where parents can feel engaged. You can come up with a solution that everyone feels confident. You can build 2 wonderful schools, and you can meet your objectives.
Question.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for setting this up. It's good to see, some of the behind the scenes, how the thought process goes. So my questions are more from a concerned taxpayer and also a parent and a friend in the neighborhood. We recently seen this nice addition being built, and I'm just wondering where that was in this, in this sort of discussion in the context of these demographic changes. And this didn't happen overnight. It was obviously an expensive addition, so why hasn't this conversation happened earlier, and the transparency with some of those decisions and spending that kind of money, and the kids not having a playground for a year is, those are fairly impactful decisions, and we just haven't seen any transparency with respect to those.
Are you referring, sir, to the FDK addition, the full-day kindergarten?
Yeah.
That was mandated by the province.
Right.
So we needed to find a solution to provide full-day kindergarten to the Garden students. So the funding came from the ministry to build an addition.
It just seems short-sighted that you did one step and then there's a secondary, we're also doing this next step. So it should all be considered looking at the bigger map.
Or probably, if I can add to what he's saying, what I'm thinking, what he's saying is that, I don't need to stand up, man. Okay, I think you can. But anyways, is that why wasn't, for example, you built the SK and JK classrooms. Why wasn't it thought of that maybe there would maybe a second floor onto that, or something like, again, his projection, something that actually has a little foresight to what's taking place rather than building a single level dwelling. And especially with the 3 rooms, if you had a situation where you built the second floor, which wouldn't exceed the building code, because obviously this is a 2-story structure, then, you know, with all that with all that planning and the money that went into it, if it was done at that time, then we probably wouldn't be having this discussion right now. And that's what I think that's
And also, just to add to that, was if there was an undercapacity at Parkdale a couple of years ago, we should have had that conversation earlier as well, that, you know, some of these discussions versus spending $1 million, or I don't know how much it costs to build an addition. Who knows the price of the addition?
It's called the
Thank you, sir.
TDSB planning.
So the simple answer why we didn't build any more rooms in the 3 full-day kindergarten rooms is because we are working within a very strict funding envelope. The ministry only provided school boards with funds just to implement full-day kindergarten the first year that was implemented. There weren't enough funds to plan for future growth of full-day kindergarten or growth in any other grade.
We have a question, ma'am?
Hi. I think at the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned that we could go back to slides. Can we go back to the slide that talks about the next steps and the timelines, please? Thank you. And so my question is, what's the rush? Like, a decision by December? This seems very quick, considering that we're talking about a school that is currently operating under capacity. We're not overcrowded. I know a lot of this is based on projections, but as we all know, projections are fallible. For instance, in the capital facts report of the TDSB, the long-range projection graph for Toronto, this isn't a crisis yet. I know you mentioned a crisis. It isn't a crisis yet. We still have time. Things can change. So we would like, we request that you strike an area review committee. That's a committee that's required by the Ontario Ministry of Education when a school board review may have a substantial impact on the students. This has a substantial impact on us. And we request that we do a comprehensive space review. We have lots of architects among us and people who could be of assistance. There's people, use the skills that you have in this community. And make it transparent. When a boundary change was proposed at the Maurice Cody Junior Public School, they were given 3 meetings before it went through. Please do all these things and do them with us, because this means too much to us. And this timeline I think it's just unrealistic. So my question is, will you commit to including parents and including working groups and look for other options with us into this process? Thank you.
Thank you. And as you can see with the note, and I have answered a number of questions over the past couple of weeks about this particular meeting, we are willing to meet with a working group. I think we've made this clear. Maybe not clear enough, sorry, maybe not clear enough to you or to certain members, and I do apologize for that, that was not. But we're willing to meet with a small group, can't work with 100 people, but decide. Hold on. I'm talking about this. Give me a second. So that would have to be in the next few weeks.
before the election?
We can decide. Okay, so we can come back with some timelines, and working through Martha, your principal, I have a list of people who would be interested in working with us from planning, and a group of representative from the parents, and we can have, and Andrew and I would have to discuss this, we can have those meetings. Okay?
Discuss it to see if we're gonna have them or when we're gonna have them.
No, when? We've agreed to meet with you.
So we brought up
As a
enough
group.
reasons to have a meeting.
We need to have them without this
Obviously.
looming deadline imposed upon us. It's just this arbitrary deadline.
I think we're here listening still, and we're seeking other viable solutions, and not a lot of other viable solutions really have come forward. We're hearing just a lot of keep things the same, but just let me respond. So this timeline is set about for letting parents know what their options are for applying to school in September 2015. So parents start applying to junior kindergarten in the early spring. So we want parents to know what their designated home school is. Are they eligible to apply to Garden, or do they have to go to Parkdale if they're not in the system yet? And so that's where this November, December kind of time range is important. It's about letting parents know in advance of what their options are for September. Now, in terms of the enrollment, yeah, it's down from where it was last year. But the part of the projection that was realized was the front piece. So the junior kindergarten and the senior kindergarten came in at projection. Where it came down was through the grades. I mentioned that we had higher retention rates, but we lost some kids this year actually in the lower grades. But we got the kids in junior kindergarten and senior kindergarten. And at the beginning of summer, we actually had way more kids pre-registered than we were anticipating. The projection right now was, I think, 48. I think there's 49 JKs right now. We have 55 kids at the end of June pre-registered. If you take a cohort of 55 and you start moving it through Garden, you can see how the crisis materializes. And if we did the projections with a cohort of 55, the projection would be over 430 kids in Garden. And then we're asking kids who are in Garden to leave the building. This approach is about this slow, gradual implementation, giving parents advance notice of what their options are for September 2015.
And I don't mean to monopolize this microphone, obviously, but when you say that other options haven't come forward, we're playing catch up. We got this note 10 days ago. And I think we've done a really good job mobilizing and finding out the issues since then. So all we're asking is work with us, amend these timelines. This isn't realistic, and by your own data, it's not a September 2015 problem.
Thank you. We have a question.
Sherry DeNovo, I'm your MPP, and I'm delighted to be here this evening. I just wanted to say I'd be very, very happy to be part of your working group. I absolutely believe parents need to be consulted. And I just wanted to add a little bit of history. When I was first elected, so I'm just going into my 9th year now, 2 schools were slated for closing in our riding. Those schools are now packed. So things do, things do change. There's no question things change. A couple of other items. The TDSB is absolutely correct. It was the province that mandated full-day kindergarten, which I support, but what I didn't support is that they didn't put enough money behind it to do it properly. And so that's part of the struggle we've had here. At Parkdale, the reason that there's 300 less than was proposed, they lost a good 200 students when Harper deported most of our Roma students over there, and I was very involved in trying to fight that there too. But I wanted to say I fought with Swansea and I fought with Runnymede to get more money. We won with Swansea. We kept the schools open by fighting at the ministry level. So it's very important that you get a ministry take on this too, and you've got somebody willing to fight with you at the province of Ontario level, which I'm happy to do. So just wanted to let you know.
Sir?
Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank you for the presentation tonight and bringing this great information to us. However, I would echo the concerns that were raised by others in the room, and really the surprise at your short timelines and the disappointment that you didn't involve the community more and the parents more in this process. I think that's really important. I have 2 short questions. You said at one point that you had considered the option of relocating the daycare, but decided that you didn't want to choose that option because you felt it was, the daycare was a vital part of the school, part of the mandate, really. So my question is then, in terms of grandfathering, will children who are enrolled in that daycare, will they also be grandfathered in that process? Since it's such an important part of the school, as you've just
Yes,
outlined.
our current admission practices, and our admission practices respect kids who are in the childcare. It applies to them.
So they would be grandfathered in, eligible for it. It wasn't clear in your presentation, and
Yes.
as a father of someone who's in the daycare, it was a question I had.
Yeah, they'd be
Okay.
grandfathered.
My second, sorry.
What about kids who don't live in the catchment area who go to the daycare? They're still grandfathered.
That's a good question.
We would be examining that. We don't have a comment to give you right now.
Okay. My second question is that I'm not sure if either of you are familiar with this area, where in Toronto you live, but if you spend much time and drive around here, you'll realize that Lansdowne is actually a very busy street. The traffic on Lansdowne moves very quickly. It doesn't have the benefit of being slowed down by streetcars. So I'm just wondering if you've worked with the Ministry of Transportation to do a traffic study. You're proposing having very young children cross an extremely busy street. And I think that, we've seen, unfortunately, some very unfortunate accidents in Toronto this past year involving small children. I'm wondering if that's something you've taken into consideration, the safety of children in the area.
We do take into consideration safety. We have a transportation department that reviews streets and sidewalks to see if some student should be bused. The reality is we have busy streets here, and kids have to cross the street to get to the space that's available for them. And we have to mitigate, we have to manage the traffic and provide safe crossings. And that's where we work with Toronto Police Services. And they can come out and do a study, and they can assess whether a crossing guard is required. The city can determine if signage is required. So there's multiple crossings of Lansdowne. Students already cross Lansdowne to get to Parkdale. Roncesvalles is another busy street, and students have to cross Roncesvalles to get to Garden right now. So it's something that we have to manage, and there's tools to help us manage.
Just a point of clarification, that older students would cross Lansdowne right now, not students of the age you're proposing. And it wasn't clear whether or not you agreed that you would proceed to do a traffic study under the Ministry of Transportation guidelines, or if you would do your own study, and if that was something you would do before you considered making the decision to change the boundaries.
Toronto Police Services comes out and does a survey of kids who are crossing. So we would implement this recommendation. We'd start to have kids travel to the school. Then Toronto Police Services would be able to measure the need for mitigation.
Before you'd make the change?
No.
You would ask,
No.
how does that process work?
It can be a request from a principal of Toronto Police Services, from an official of the TDSB. It can be from City Council or even the Toronto Police Services. But they come out and do a survey, so they actually have to see kids moving across the street.
But you're not asking for that study to be done?
We're not asking for that to be done right now.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Question here?
Use my. Yeah, hi, sorry. Thanks. Just a quick question about, we go back to the slides where you did the projections. And then also that other slide as well. So right there, yeah, so the 2017, 2016, it seems like if you look at how you're projecting by 2015, you're going to be at 314 students. Is that the head count that's being projected for?
Yes.
Okay, so can you go back to the slide where you drew out how the extension of the classrooms had to be in the playground? Okay, why is that not on top of the 3-room addition?
So the 3-room addition.
So could that be?
Okay, so two issues is the 3-room addition cannot accommodate a second floor. It was not designed to bear a second floor.
So okay,
that was something that we had to do because of the limited funding that we were working with. Really, when we build in schools, we love to plan for flexibility.
So
we love
thank you.
big
So
school
that's-
sites and to be able to put additions on.
Thank you, that's what I wanted to know. The reason why I wanted to know that is the following. Did you know at that time when the ministry said build these FPKs, that we had a projection that showed we were going to have a problem?
No,
that
we-
overcrowding problem is gonna exist?
No, we didn't.
So we didn't know that at
We
that
didn't.
time. So therefore, we couldn't actually plan to say, can we actually, similar to the comment that was made earlier about architects that we have and engineers that are in the neighborhood, is that not possible that we can get creative in terms of the so-called working group mandate that you're looking for, Ms. Atkinson? What if that working group actually looked at how can we build?
Yeah, a third floor
Given-
can be built.
No, the second
on the-
floor, not the third floor, but the
Okay,
second floor.
a third floor can be built on the permanent building.
Can or cannot?
Can.
Oh, so why is that part of that
For
option?
two reasons. The Ministry of Education has to approve construction projects. The Ministry of Education wants us to use existing surplus space in nearby schools. They will not approve expanding this school when you have a half-empty school.
And
very
that's
close by.
even if the parents are willing to come to
Now,
battle
the
with
second,
you and kind of have a conversation
second
with you, that
issue,
still won't happen? Is
the
that how,
Wouldn't make
it just won't make a difference?
the second issue is it's a 1.7 acre school site.
No, I get that.
How many
And then-
students do you want on a 1.7 acre school site?
No, agreed.
It's our architects and engineers' best
So I-
judgment that we
hammer
shouldn't
on
be
it.
allowing 300 kids on the site. So
No,
even
we
if we had the
appreciate-
money, we shouldn't build the rooms because then we're accommodating 300 plus kids on 1.7 acres, and then programming is affected for everybody here.
So as everybody kind of already echoed as well, right? It's 10 days, we're trying to process all of this information, and fortunately or unfortunately, it doesn't really matter in the context of who gets affected, but it's lack of transparency in terms of getting parents involved and community involved. And you know what? As much as you might have had backroom conversations about how exactly this must be dealt with, and you've made privy to a lot of information as a trustee, you did not share that with the rest of the community, right? So please allow others to kind of have a comment around what this working group is. We really want
Thank you, sir. Sir.
To that question, now I've got at least 4 or 5, so I appreciate the extra information that you're giving and the responses, but my questions just keep growing. But I want to back up and I want to apologize to you first for earlier when I raised my voice and yelled when somebody else was speaking to ask you to be more specific. Got a little heated, so I apologize for that. Okay. The working group has been resolved. That was one of my growing questions, so thank you for that. I want to ask about Parkdale, and Sherry DeNovo made reference to the deportation of Roma children, and you just very much surprised me by saying that when that addition was being planned, you didn't have any of these projections. That's got me asking a question about what prompted you to suddenly have these projections? What was the genesis of this? Is this something you look at across the city regularly, or can you tell us here tonight what suddenly prompted you to have that analysis done?
The system is very dynamic. Parents make decisions every school year about what they want to do for education. They make different decisions during the school year of where they want to be. We do projections every single school year. It's not just a one-time job. We do them every single school year for the next year and looking the next 10 years out. And the reason why we do them every year is because how dynamic the system is. They're just not reliable if you do them at one moment in time. You're naive if you assume that they're going to be true. That's just the nature of small geographic area projections. They're highly variable. We need to do the projections every year. When we were looking at Garden and planning the full-day kindergarten edition, we were planning well in advance of 2013. We were looking at enrollments and trends in around 2010. And so our projections at that time suggested that Garden was going to be full. We didn't have projections that suggested it was going to be overcrowded. So that's why we didn't start planning boundary changes and grade changes at that time. So really it's a trend that's emerged over the last 3 years, and now we're believing that it's becoming settled. It's also manifesting itself in the preschool age population. So we buy this data from this third-party demographic firm, and when you look at the births and the 1-year-olds and the 2-year-olds and the 3-year-olds, they're not going down. They're not spiking either, but they're staying at this relatively high level. And that's what's driving that cohort of 50 to 48 junior kindergarten kids coming in.
So let's focus on the buying of the data. How long have you had this relationship with this firm? Do you know?
Oh, 4 years, and we buy it every year. Every year they patch together this data set.
You have a standing contract with them?
Yes.
And do you have rights to the algorithms that they use to predict this data?
No, it's a canned application. They do tell us what the data sources are. They patch together a census, so to speak. We buy data from vital statistics, from a variety of federal ministries.
But in essence, you're creating public policy on bought data with no right to the algorithm that produces those numbers.
The data is actually confidential and the ministries don't release it. So
But
how
the
this firm
IPC
works is they have servers in these different ministries, and the ministries won't release the data at the address level. They will aggregate it to a level. So this company gives the ministries our boundaries, and they aggregate it up to our boundaries for us. So there is no way that we can drill down to the individual student level or the individual person level for confidentiality reasons.
Okay, I don't want to get stuck on it, but it mirrors in my mind, just on what I've heard here tonight, the situation with the tiny township and the dump that they wanted to build. And they said that they were not going to disturb groundwater. People in the local area wanted to know how those projections were being achieved. They said, sorry, it's all done by a private company, they own the algorithm. And the Information and Privacy Commissioner ordered a pretty shocking, or made a pretty shocking order, basically telling the municipality that they had to sue that firm if it wouldn't hand over the algorithm. And this sounds like, to me, like it's exactly the same thing. We don't need to get stuck on it, but I'm wondering, the data that you're using, how much of it can we get? And is the contract available to us? Like, I want to know a lot more about the relationship with this company and the validity of their predictive data. And to further that point, if we followed your projections, I didn't copy down the exact number, they're saying that Parkdale, over time, will rise from 400-ish students right now to 500 and something. So it has me really questioning how they're predicting that, because as has been mentioned several times, and I referred to earlier, 400 children were deported. The families emptied space. I don't think any of us know here what happened to those housing units. And it's a big mystery to me, and I'm certainly going to do more checking and try to get an answer as to what's happening with the space they were living in. Why aren't the children coming back into those spaces? And when they do, what's going to happen in Parkdale? I'm really questioning how this firm goes about its predictions. And I know you can't answer that here, but I want to know who I can speak to, specifically who I can speak to get as much information as I can. I want to know what records are in the custody and control of the board, and which ones are subject to confidentiality, so that we as a community can make a decision on how much further we want to go with that. So who would we speak to?
I just want to clarify, the company did not do these enrollment projections. We buy the population data from them, and it's an important driver of our projection.
Oh,
but
great.
it's
So
our projection methodology, and as I mentioned, we do it every single school year because of the dynamic nature of the city.
So you do the predicting?
Our department does the projections, so we have
So you
10
own the
planners who
algorithm.
do it.
So you
Yes,
own the
I can describe our projection methodology. And
So
that
we can get it from you.
that preschool population is from this third-party provider. We call it a grade retention or grade progression methodology, where we look at how many kids are retained from one grade to another as they move year to year. We factor in applications to French that happen in early of the calendar year. We factor in placements to special education programs. We factor in local input from the principal. And we factor in active residential development that comes from the city of Toronto.
Okay, so we can get more information from you on that?
Yes.
Past tonight, okay. And just one more. There's been a lot of talk here tonight about how much we value our school. Those of us who use the daycare also value the daycare. So I'm wondering if any of the work that you've done has looked at how these boundary changes will affect the viability of our daycare, because that's very important to us too. And I don't know, I don't have a theory. I'm just wondering if you looked at it.
Don't have any thoughts on that.
Is that important to you? It's really important to us.
So the childcare needs to be viable, and they'll have admission practices to make sure that they're viable. And we're going to have to review those admission practices from time to time to make sure that it's managing the enrollment overall in the school. I think that's the best that I can do. We're not imagining any change on the childcare's admission practice at this time.
Good thing that's the working group.
I was gonna talk about that. Okay. to add it to the working group.
Okay, thank you.
So, sir, thank you, sir, for your questions. It is... It is 8 o'clock. I realize some of you need to go. We will stay. And what we will do, and if you don't mind, just give me a second so I can explain the next few steps, is that we're going to work through Martha, your principal, for those of you who are interested in working on a working group with us. So you can leave your name, information with Martha.
Sorry, I just want to reiterate, what about the parents who aren't currently in Garden? How would they be involved? Because they're the ones that are potentially affected. Are you going to notice the rest of the community?
So the working group will be a group of representatives. So it's not going to be
Absolutely.
everybody who could potentially be affected. So we're going to have to rely upon representatives to bring their judgment and ideas to
Right,
the
oh,
So-
so only because you mentioned through
Yeah.
the principal, who I don't know and I don't yet have a relationship with, but I have a concern.
So then, obviously, the Garden parents will let Martha know. Then we could do reps from AMG, reps from Parkdale. Fern, sorry, from Fern, to put together the work. So we'll work through the principals.
So, sorry, I'm not sure if you understand what I'm saying. I have a 2-year-old.
Oh,
who
you
will
don't,
be
you're not, I
affected
get it.
by
Sorry, I
this
thought you were a
change.
parent at
Yeah,
another school
yeah,
already.
no.
Talk to me after.
Like, so many of us have kids who are
Absolutely.
3 who are supposed to come here next year. That's why we're.
Then I would say, can you stay behind, talk to me, and
Okay,
we'll
I
figure
recognize
it
a
out.
whole bunch of kids here that might.
So what we're suggesting is that we do get reps, and thank you for that. We do get reps, and then after we know who you are and get your information, then we'll work together at putting some kind of a timeline, get back to you in the next couple of weeks in terms of a working committee, working meeting, and go from there.
On the, will you accept about Parkdale to, and then put it on Parkdale?
Yeah, you mentioned Parkdale. Okay? So through your principal here, if you're from Garden, through other principals, if you're from the other schools, from AMG and Parkdale, and for parents who are not yet at any of those schools, if you wouldn't mind staying behind, I'll meet with you and we can figure out. Okay, so we will have the meetings. We'll have at least one meeting to discuss it. Bring ideas. And we'll bring as much data as possible so that we can discuss the ideas. Okay? Thank you for those of you who need to leave. We appreciate you coming over. Like I said, we'll stay a few minutes behind to answer some questions, only those questions, and then we'll go from there. Thank you, folks.
What about the
Sir?
question, what about the question of the deadline being amended that Leslie asked? You brushed that off. Are you
Oh,
going to
sorry.
request more time, yes or no?
Well, I think at this time, we need more time. We need more
So
time.
you're agreeing to that?
It would be too rushed to do everything within a week or so and then go through all of this. I don't think that we'll have a few more weeks. Sir?
All right, thank you. I have a few questions, and thanks for the clarification of the fantastic presentation. It makes a lot of things more clear for us. A little heads up next time would be appreciated. Maybe some PR spin in your PR department would help this process when it happens to other catchments. My first question has to do with the parking lot. Has the parking lot been taken into consideration as a possible place to put portables or an expansion to the school if capital funding was available?
No, we didn't look at giving up the parking.
It may be something to consider in our working group. Number 2, and this is something I may have missed in this last 10 days of madness because I'm not too up to date on my speed and all that stuff. But it seems you have a big problem on your hands, and it's not just at the municipal level, it's not just at the provincial level, it's at the federal level as well. It has to do with funding, it has to do with population, and a whole bunch of factors that none of us really can control ourselves. So has anybody thought through the French immersion program that is currently at Fern? Has there been any thought put into making a center of excellence at Parkdale Collegiate that is a hub of excellence that is all concerning with French, with Fern, Parkdale Public School? When I look at the frame that's above me here, I see Parkdale still has a problem at 2023 with only 57% enrollment. That's a hugely unutilized space. There's a lot of population that could still be pumped in that school 10 years from now. So has any thought been put into how you can further what we're going to do aside from just disrupting 97 or 100 odd students from the school? My third question is, I wasn't going to ask this until I got a little enraged earlier. But I see on one of these things with our schedule of events that you have proposed a working meeting. I'm proposing that we make a working meeting happen after our municipal election. I have seen nothing but contempt tonight from our current trustee towards some of the questions that this audience that she is supposed to represent have directed towards you. The rest of you, thank you for listening to us.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Sir.
Hard to follow that question. Can you pull up the slide with the enrollment for the previous years up, please? For the previous years, you have that there?
So 2000 and, this is just Garden, 2006 to 2013, by grade.
Can you pull up the graph, please? Okay, that graph will do. That's not the one I was thinking of.
So of the school-age population, blue bars?
The ones with you had the percentage of people who chose and didn't choose. Excellent. So when I look at that graph, you have real data, not projections.
Yes.
Right? And I thought I heard you say earlier that, you know, when you try to do predictions using as many points as you can. And I guess what I see, and it's very obvious, is the real data, the non-projected data, is kind of flat and has variability in it for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years really. So I'm wondering why you're trusting that we should suddenly ignore all that and only go with the recent increase. Suddenly we're not going to have variability.
The variability could happen. And we're
Why is it
dealing
going
with
to happen?
a
Can you
constrained
explain?
site, which I've mentioned several occasions now, and we're trying to minimize impact on current kids. And I just want to show the big assumptions of the projection. You can see this model, it's not deviating that much from the trend in the recent past. It's not deviating that much from the school-age population, which is staying at 450.
It is.
The big impact here is assuming that this cohort is retained at the school.
Well, I'd like to ask you a question then. I see on your total headcount predicted, there's absolutely no variability for 8, 9 years. How on earth, you're asking us to completely ignore what has happened for 6 or 7 years, telling us to trust this, and there's no explanation as to how you came up with it. Can you actually provide us with that?
I've attempted to do that in the presentation this evening.
That the previous variability is something that we should not pay attention to.
The fact that it's a constrained site and additional kids showing up at the site next year or the year after will cause us to remove kids from this building. And by doing a boundary change now, it allows us to do that full grandparenting, including the younger siblings. So we're trying to prevent something in the order of 4 to 5 kids showing up in junior kindergarten next year. And the grandparenting allows that to happen. It manages that decrease of approximately 4 to 5 kids next year.
And how exactly do you predict the percentage of people that will choose to go to Garden? Because that was also varying.
You have to choose a participation rate based upon past trends. That's all the information that's available to us.
And that past trend was also variable on your graph. And yet there's no variability in these predictions.
I'm not sure what you mean by variability in these projections. This is one model based upon those assumptions that I defined this evening.
Look at your predictions, total head count, second to the right, starting at 2014. There's absolutely no variability in that data. It is going straight up in a straight line. And I'm saying, quite obviously, there's no history for that in our neighborhood, and your data shows that. Could you please explain why that should be?
It's a factor of the algorithm. And the inputs, you do see that there is some variation in the inputs, and that variation in the inputs, the incoming JK class, is coming from the preschool population, the births, the 1-year-olds, the 2-year-olds, and the 3-year-olds. But really, beyond there, it's a great assumption of what the future JK class could be. And so we basically flatline it at some level. There's no other inputs to suggest a variation in the future. But that variation in the front is driven by the preschool population.
Last question, will it be possible for somebody to be more specific about the math and how this is done?
I'm trying to be specific now, and maybe we need to show it to you in a spreadsheet. But the reason why things look very consistent is because we're applying one retention rate. There's different retention rates up here. We would just be pulling numbers out of the air if we were to decide that the retention rate should change this year compared to this year, compared to this year, compared to this year. We're choosing an average retention rate observed over the last 3 years, and we're applying it consistently into the future. There's no other evidence that we have to suggest the retention rate should change. We're using an average retention rate observed over the past. So that's why that doesn't go up and down, is because of the inputs and assumptions that we're making.
Okay, that's very helpful, because you're saying you're using the last 3 years instead of the last 10 years.
Yes, it relies more upon the recent trend.
Very flawed. That seems very flawed.
Okay, so I think you've heard me say several times now that the system is highly dynamic. We're talking about predicting decisions that parents make. And parents make decisions during the school year. They make decisions between school years. It's very hard to predict the decisions that they make. And that's why we monitor enrollment every month. That's why we do projections every school year. If projections were reliable, we would have done them once 30 years ago, and the board would never have a need for planners. We'd just be laying off those one set of projections. We do them every year because of the variance and because of the dynamic nature of the city. That's the reality that we have to work in. As planners, we love to plan sites with flexibility so that we can accommodate those fluctuations. We love to have 5-acre school sites that can accommodate portables. We don't have a 5-acre school site here, we have a 1.7-acre school site.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, Andrew. So now we have 4 people here, and this lady has been very patient with me. We'll do those 5 questions, and then we're going to bring it to a close. Thank you. Please.
First of all, I just want to thank the school or this committee for sending out that letter, because I haven't had a son in this school for a very long time. He's now 30, so. But my son was here for 8 years till grade 4. Then he went to Annette Public School, and then he went to Etobicoke School of the Arts. Those 2 schools were not in our catchment at all, but he was able to go because at that time the school recognized that children aren't cookie cutter created and need individual programs to succeed. This meeting really reminds me of the meeting when they were going to put all the garbage trucks at Wabash there, and now it's a beautiful park. We were told that at that meeting that it was already decided, fait accompli, that was going to be a parking lot for the garbage trucks of the city, and the public got so enraged. It's now a wonderful park, so things can change. What I'm really disappointed here is because it's not just people who have children in this school that are concerned about education. Education is important for everyone because it determines our society. So yet I wasn't even involved. If I hadn't read that leaflet, I wouldn't know about this. And my real question is, don't we have to figure out why parents want to cross major streets to bring their children to this school and not go to Parkdale? Why is this school so successful? What is this school doing right that perhaps other schools aren't? And one of the things I know is that very large schools and institutions are not necessarily successful for a lot of kids because they can get lost. And small schools, you have a feeling that you can speak to teachers. You know, there's just more parent involvement. Well, you kind of get lost in a big institution. So my question really is, what is this school doing right? Fix that in Parkdale so that people want to go there before you start forcing them to go there.
Thank you for your comment. Was that a question or a comment?
my question is, before you, I think turn this off. Before you make this decision, you need to fix Parkdale. You've sort of put the
And then let me just answer this.
And not to say that Parkdale is a bad school, I'm not saying that, but clearly parents make decisions based
I think that
on-
we're not here for pinning one school against the other. We're delighted that every community like their school. We're not here to compare this school and this other school.
Well,
okay.
Well,
I don't think we should be going there because you're making a lot of assumptions here. A lot of assumptions. And I want to be respectful of the parents who choose to send their children to Parkdale and the parents and staff who serve Parkdale. We really have to be respectful of this. Your question, please.
Sure. Thanks. That was a great setup, though, about choices. I moved here to this neighborhood 3 years ago from New York City. And one of the reasons why we chose Toronto, my husband's American, I'm from Toronto, is because it's a big city that's very diverse and culturally interesting, but it's a city of towns. And you get that small town vibe and small town school. And we chose to buy a house because it was, zoned for a school that was one like my childhood and my husband's childhood. And if we think about the two schools, Grover could sum it up well. It's small versus big, and it's two different choices. But all of that aside, I'm not even gonna, question the integrity of the data. I think that's been done. I have kids who are 15 months and 3.5, and I wasn't notified. If it wasn't for my amazing neighbors, who despite the fact that this doesn't affect them in the same way and are still here for me, oh my God, I cry. What's happening? What is this salty discharge? Why wasn't I considered? Was it reckless oversight? I wouldn't even be here tonight. I don't know about any of this if it wasn't for my new friends that 10 days ago were strangers.
We did
Sarah.
We did an extensive mail drop to the affected addresses. There was 6,700 notices that went out. Canada Post delivered them to the
I
affected
didn't get it.
addresses. So you have to read all of your mail. We've heard this at
I did.
we've heard this at past community meetings. Not everybody checks pieces of paper that come through the mail. I'm not sure if we can do any more than 6,700 notices.
Show of hands,
We'll
anybody
follow up
received
on that. But I'm sorry that you did not get it firsthand.
When did that go out?
2 weeks ago? At the same time. Okay, thank you. Ma'am?
I just wanted to draw attention again, thank you, to the wider implications of this proposal. We're very happy that our kids get to stay, and that certainly diffused the situation, and it's nice to hear that they can complete their schooling here. But regarding property values, that area drawn there, it seems to me that a lot of housing demand, as has already been mentioned, is driven by the quality of schooling in the neighborhood. And there's no doubt in my mind that people who live in that area will face declining value of their properties. I have a real estate license, I know what I'm talking about. So that's a form of partial expropriation. As somebody who just came out of a 2-year renovation ordeal, that's quite a blow. Another point regarding social diversity of our community, wider implication. In 2010, there was a study published by Professor Kulchansky at the University of Toronto, and the title was "The 3 Cities Within Toronto." And it was discussed how our city has been segregating along social and ethnic lines. And I think what this does, it takes us into that direction. And after this, our neighborhood will never be the same. It's social segregation. Regarding solutions, it was already mentioned that there is a win-win solution for everyone. Improve the surrounding schools. And that would automatically reduce the demand for this one, and we won't have those projections. So, and everyone will be better off as a result. And we get to stay diverse and vibrant. That's vital for our urban communities. There are other ways to solve this. More beneficial, less destructive ways. You know what I mean? This is tearing our social fabric apart. It's not good.
I just want to be able to say that as a parent whose children are not going to be affected by this transition, and I just learned that tonight. So it's important, again, communication with the working group, whatever you do moving forward. But I am also uneasy with the concept that because I have the right as a parent in this community to want to keep my children's community intact, that somehow I am negatively judging the community of Parkdale, of which I'm also part. And I do not like that. We are capable of seeing what's going on in the community, and many of us are engaged in the community, and I think our opinion needs to be respected as such. I want to leave here tonight with a very realistic understanding of what the solutions are. The MPP was here, and to hear her, she saved schools. I don't totally buy it, but I do trust that she is the MPP, and I take her at her word. But if the solution is more space, the answer is simply more space at Garden. There are no other answers. If your projections are correct, we need space. Period, full stop, end of school. End of story. So it means so it either means the parking lot goes, or it means we figure out how to get another layer on this building somehow. But if I understand the MPP, who on one side says they did education right with full-day kindergarten, but did everything else wrong, except for her efforts, of course, then what is it exactly that anybody can do at the ministry to fund the capital expansion in the first place? I don't want to leave here saying this is a possibility if it is just not realistically on the book.
No. But if Garden's going to continue to overpopulate, we're going to be right back.
And I'll just give you a little more background. Everybody heard about the capital freeze that we're in, where the ministry came in and stopped us from making any expenditure on our buildings. This happened in 2012. And they took away our power to spend capital dollars, building on land, or monies on land and buildings. And that's because they're concerned about our costs, and they're concerned about the management of our space. And so they put in two outside advisors, the special assistance team, and they worked with us for a year. They reviewed all of our work to get our costs under control and to get an accommodation plan that made wise use of our dollars. To get ourselves out of that capital freeze, we had to review all of our proposed accommodation projects with the ministry one by one, and we reinvented them to conform to their guidelines. And one of their major guidelines was use your existing space. And that's what they've been consistent with. We have to use our existing space. We talked to them last week about this to give them the heads up, saying, we've got this proposed boundary change. We're proposing to move kids to Parkdale, and they agreed with us completely. You must use your existing
It's a
space.
bigger problem. What can we do as a whole? Not as a community, not as a ward, not as a street affected. What can we do, us, together, as a whole, at the provincial level? Because that sounds like a load of malarkey from me, from the government. Not from you, from the government above you. What can we do to push back as a whole?
This is through your politicians, that's for sure, through your trustees and so on, so that people are aware of this. And I'm sure, like Andrew said, when the capital freeze came 2 years ago, maybe you weren't aware of it, most likely. Many of you were not. And we're faced with making tough decisions. Because we hear you about the portables, about a second floor or a third floor and so on. The ministry will not even entertain us if we bring this up. They're going to say, don't care. You've got space down the street type of thing. You've got excess space. You need to use it before we consider anything in the neighborhood. Two more questions, sir. Thank you for your patience.
Thanks for letting me speak. Thanks for everyone being here. Speaking as someone who has a child, she's 2.5, so she isn't in the school currently, and so we found out tonight that you're proposing to grandfather in the students that are here, which I think everyone is happy about. To what this gentleman said about lines dividing, so as a parent now that we think about with our child and her neighbors and her friends, that they're going to this school, but she's been told she can't go to that school, so now she's got to go to this other school. And I think that can be painful, I think, for the child and for the parent. And I think that it would be best to be avoided if that can happen. So my preference, you know, I'm just trying to figure all this stuff out. I haven't really paid a lot of attention. The thing about the mailing, I know that I found out because my wife heard an interview on CBC radio, and then 5 days later, in the mail, we got a notification about this meeting. So we certainly weren't notified ahead of time. Other people knew about it. But anyway, and we do read our mail, for sure. So what we're wondering is, one of the questions that someone asked another child who was below JK age, I believe was in the daycare, and I think his question was, if he's in the daycare, does that mean the child can then go to the school? And I believe you answered in the affirmative. And so what we chose to do, rather than going to the daycare here, is we went to the Montessori school a couple blocks away. So would we be allowed that same right if this proposal actually comes to pass at some future point? For the people who live in the area, I think what would be a good proposal is give them the choice. If they want to go to Garden, let them go to Garden, because most parents don't start to investigate the schools until their kids are ready to go. We have parents on either side of us, they love Garden, we were in the Catchment, we never really thought about it. Just do that, but now obviously we are thinking about it. And if Parkdale can prove to us that it's a better school, well, we'll go to Parkdale. Cool. But that's a different thing than being forced and saying, you go there, these other kids, you're cool, you go there. So that's a proposal that I'd like. What do you think about that?
So that's introduced.
If you live in the area already.
Multiple home schools for addresses.
Sure.
I'm not sure it's going to reduce the enrollment.
Or just allow the ones that are already living in the area to come to this school. And then if we choose on our own, we say, we actually think Parkdale is better, we'll go there and we'll reduce the proposed overcrowding problem that's going to happen here theoretically.
So do you have a child in Garden now?
No,
you don't.
I prefaced, she's 2.5, she's in Montessori school right now. That went to my question. If we had put her in the daycare here, you're saying she could come here, but instead we went to the Montessori 2 blocks away, and then we theoretically can't come here. That doesn't seem fair.
Well, there's many different circumstances.
Right, and I'm
it's hard to
just bringing
respond
up
to all
ours.
of them. But the spirit of the grandparenting is so that current kids who are in Garden, as well as their younger siblings, that family is not disrupted. So it's about giving due notice to families who haven't made that decision yet. So that family who's not here yet, they won't be disrupted because they haven't begun here yet. So that's the spirit of the grant.
I understand
That's all I
that.
can say.
I understand.
And we had made the decision, our decision's been taken away from us.
If we had known this was happening, maybe we would have decided, if you would have told us in August, maybe we would have said, wait, we're going to put our kid in the daycare here. But you didn't tell us, even though you've been planning this, you didn't tell us.
Why were we only given 10 days notice? Why not more?
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, we hear you, sir.
Thank you.
We do. Thank you.
This is the perfect segue, because I came up, people have mentioned getting notices in their kids' backpack mixed in with their lunch. There are people who were on the west side of Roncesvalles who didn't get the notice, which seemed to suggest that they weren't part of the community and maybe wouldn't care. You talked about respect, you talked about due notice. I want to just ask one pointed question. Why did you give us 10 days to think about and mobilize and process this massive change?
Well, I'll start and you can add. This is part of the process to alert the communities that we're going to have a meeting. So that's what we did. We're discussing it right now. We said that we would be willing to do working committees and to have additional meetings to discuss it more. This is what we're doing.
But you've obviously put a lot of effort into all of this information. Why wouldn't you share some of this with us instead of a notice saying what it said? It was a ridiculous notice to get on a Thursday afternoon.
The notice was an invitation to this meeting where the information was going to be shared and the discussion would occur. So when we do boundary changes, we do hold a community meeting like this to share the information and to share our thinking and to gauge.
Dated February. Why did you tell us now?
Every year we plan, we do projections, we're looking out to the next year.
February.
And this is how you show
And
respect
so
to parents.
we are here tonight to share the information and to get feedback and to gauge the reaction. Past boundary changes, sometimes the one meeting is enough. Sometimes it's accepted. Sorry, I'm speaking. It's accepted and people are content with the grandparenting and it's done. Other meetings, we require more work to do. And that's what we're here tonight.
Was the grandparenting already organized when that proposal went out?
The grandparenting-
I'm going to ask the people in charge.
No, we were monitoring enrollment. When we were looking at the pre-registration of 55 junior kindergarten kids, we were concerned that we wouldn't be out to grandparents. The enrollment has come down a little bit in September. We've monitored it each week. We've revised our thinking around the grandparenting.
So the
and now we're
grandparenting
able to-
hinged on 5 or so students? It could have gone either way.
Okay, that's.
Okay, so, I mean, just, please,
That's-
sir.
No, but that's one of my points, that when you look at JKSK, yes, they are high to start out with, but we all know that all parents at the age of, when they get into grade, I think it's grades 2, 3, we also notice the numbers drop significantly. A lot of parents are putting their kids in French immersion.
It's reflected in the data, that's what's there.
No, but again, even if you take that, it's still gonna go, like, again, the school's not gonna, like, your projections are like way off the map. And what I'm saying is that even though the JKs and that are looking full right now, a lot of kids are gonna go to Montessori schools, they're gonna go to French immersions within the area. So those numbers are not gonna be stacked. They're not gonna remain at what you're projecting right there. They're gonna come down a great significant amount. And the amount of kids coming into the school, into this area that are gonna enroll here are not gonna be the same ratio as the kids that are gonna be leaving. And that happens in every school. My child went to OOPS school, and the same thing. All the kids, like at grade 2, 3, 4, all went to Dewison to go to French immersion, and their numbers drop. And OOPS is a private school, it's the same size as this. Not the schoolyard, but the actual school itself. So when you're making these projections, I'm just kind of confused at, like,
But you're taking that into consideration.
Yeah, and I think
So we
we've
do have that available
acknowledged
in
on many
school.
occasions tonight that there's going to be variance. So this is a possible future. We're trying to manage that possible future so that we don't have this crisis and we're asking kids to leave from this school. So I think in this working meeting, we're going to be exploring other ideas, and there was an excellent suggestion that we have an emergency plan where everybody agrees to it, that if a certain number happens in the future, then this action happens. And that action could be these kids leave the school.
So
Well, that was the idea that was here, but that's what's going to happen in
Okay.
the working committee.
This is the last comment or question, sir, please.
So thank you very much for all the information at this point. I think we've accomplished one of our objectives. We're going to have a working meeting. I feel like there's just been a lack of deeper understanding of some of the implications of delivering that notice. There's a difference between strategy and forecasting, and what we've heard about mostly today, it's good, and it's valuable, and it's useful, but there is a difference between forecasting and strategy. Strategy is asking big, tough questions about the future of public education. And when you deliver that notice with a simplified or simplistic solution to this problem, you deny us the right to talk together and work together to figure out a good solution to a shared problem, and you force us into a simplistic debate about a line on a map. I lived 200 feet from the school for 10 years, and then I bought a house in the Catchment to send my kids here. I sent them to an alternative school until grade 1, but I decided in June to come here. 2 weeks into my experience with the TDSB, my kid brings this notice home to me saying, I don't get to go there anymore. I can't tell you how disrespectful that is. And it points to something very deeply wrong in whatever processes you have, and they have to change. So I have 2 requests. We have our working meeting. I feel that working meeting cannot be productive, cannot be effective at true strategy and simply focusing on forecasts unless we retract this proposal and talk about the problem that we all share together instead of talking about which few families might bear the burden of the problem that we share together.
That will certainly be discussed at the working group. So let me recap. If you're interested in working, you're a parent from Garden, please make sure that you see the principal in the next couple of days. And we will be in touch. I would need emails and so on, email addresses. If you're a Parkdale parent, same thing. You can go to Miriam and we'll do the same thing. Alex will do the same thing for Fern parents also. For parents at AMG, I will contact the principal at AMG and let her know also if there are some parents here that you know who would like to be reps. For parents who are not yet in one of those schools, stay behind. I'll get your information and we will go from there. Thank you, folks, for your time. We appreciate it. And we will see a number of you again in the next few weeks. Thank you.
I know you closed the meeting, so anybody who wants to keep listening can. I just wanted to say one thing. I think I really appreciate what your statement is. And I think that if the working group, instead of coming about boundary changes, that be the working group coming about potential forecasting, crowding, and asset utilization. So one thing that hasn't been talked about here, and I think that this parent group doesn't yet know, and I think you should really learn about, and I know you will when I mention it, is that the way school boards are funded the way schools are funded are by pupils. And by not giving Parkdale the number of students it needs, it's losing funding. And I understand big, small. Hey, I want my daughter to go to a small school where I'm going to know everybody. I get that. But I also think that a big school has lots of opportunities, has swimming pools, has extra programs. So we balance, and there's two choices, and I get that we want choices. I love your idea of a center of excellence. I think that's a brilliant idea for an underutilized school. But what we didn't mention here, and I think what's so critical to problem solving, is to understand that this is about utilization of our assets that we have paid through with our taxes. And we have an empty school with so many resources right there, and an overutilized school right here. And the idea, I'm really frustrated by the idea that people are talking about building an addition here, but then you're saying the problem is that it's big. But that's making this bigger. That's changing this structure. So it's not that it's big. And so, I get that you're frustrated that people are talking about the us and them mentality, but we are everybody's bringing that lens. Don't just say that somebody's putting that on you. Everyone's bringing that lens. Let's not talk about...
Absolutely not. I speak for myself. That is unfair.
Okay, so the idea that building a bigger school saves us from going to a bigger school. So I think when we have a meeting, it really needs to be about solving the global problem of this catchment area, understanding the global issues, and that includes funding pupil places, which was never mentioned here, that includes the utilization of space, and that includes a very good transition plan if any change is made, and great new ideas. This was one great new idea about a Center for French Excellence, and I think there's probably so many more that could come here. But problem-solving meeting, I think, is brilliant. Thank you.